years. So I was really concerned that he may do something like take his life. But again, when he came over, he was really happy and he seemed to be in a really good place. He had all these plans to go visit a lot of his friends.
Awekenge, this is Mental Matters, hosted by Asekho Toto.
Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of Mental Matters. I'm your host, Asekho Toto, and before we dive into today's incredible conversation, I have a small favor to ask. If you enjoy what you hear today, please take a moment to rate and review our podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen. Your feedback not only helps us improve, but also helps others discover the valuable insights we share every week. And if you find today's episode particularly inspiring or insightful, don't forget to share it with your friends, family, or anyone you think could benefit from it. Thank you for your support. It truly means the world to us. Now, let's get back into our conversation.
Hello, how are you doing?
I'm doing good, and you?
Doing fine, thank you.
And firstly, Kevin, I would like to say thanks so much for being here. Really appreciate your time. Really appreciate you for just actually being here and actually telling us about your story and why do you see the need of actually talking about suicide. And definitely when it comes to suicide, especially the stats, they are very alarming, and especially when it comes to men, as someone that lost their son due to suicide, I believe that it have some psychological effect on you. So quite interested on that route, and definitely in terms of establishing Love Never Ends ministry, quite interested on that. So yeah, and in general, yeah, that's my conversation with you today. So yeah, and again, thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for actually spending at least an hour with us just to actually have this conversation. So yeah, with those words, I would like to welcome you to Mental Matters. Thank you so much for being here. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me on Mental Matters. And I've been looking forward to this because this is a very important subject, and I think that people need to really take mental health very seriously. There's so many things that can cause issues. It can be just very small things that will cause just mental health issues later on in life. And if we don't address those early on, I think that could be, it could lead to like what I experienced with my son.
And suicide has, as much as this generation, actually my generation, has became more aware when it comes to mental health. But as much as that's effect, but at the same time, the stats are very alarming when it comes to mental health, and especially when it comes to suicide. So, personally, you became a suicide awareness advocate. So, take us through that. Why did you actually want to have that need?
Yeah, I think that just losing my son to suicide just kind of guided me down that path, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. But beforehand, I was not that aware of mental health issues and had a lot of misconceptions about suicide. So going through that whole process really helped me to learn a lot more about it. Some of the things that I thought early on was that mental health was something we don't want to talk about. And when my son had to go to the psychiatrist and start getting medication, he didn't want to talk about it. He didn't want to talk about it with me. I didn't ask a lot of questions about it because he wasn't answering me too much. but he took the medication for a while, but he didn't like the way that it made him feel. So eventually he stopped taking it and stopped going to the psychiatrist. I'm not sure what his actual diagnosis was, but just looking at some of the symptoms and some of the things that other people that have been around him at the time saw, I think that he had some form of bipolar disorder, because he would shift, his emotions would shift very quickly, go from being very happy to being very angry, and just back and forth. So there were just a lot of emotions there that we couldn't really explain. But when he was on the medication, it seemed to help him quite a bit. But again, he didn't like the way it made him feel. So one of the things that from a suicide perspective, I did not want to ask him questions, ask him if he's thinking about suicide. I think that was just something from my generation. We don't want to talk about suicide. We don't want to talk about mental health. And in doing so, I think that I lost an opportunity there to just have a really good discussion with him, just to see where he was. So, it was like just about 5 days before he took his life, he came to our house and we had dinner and we were talking. He had just broken up with his girlfriend about a week and a half earlier, and he was really down about that because they'd been together about 6 years. So I was really concerned that he may do something like take his life. But again, when he came over, he was really happy and he seemed to be in a really good place. He had all these plans to go visit a lot of his friends, and it was just a really good dinner. And one of the questions I always wanted to have answered from him, because he and me and his mom were divorced at the time, and he always favored his mom over me. But when we divorced, he ended up having to live with me instead of living with her, which he wanted. But we got to develop a pretty good relationship, a much better relationship over that time. But after dinner, he said, "Dad, I know that I haven't always been the greatest son, but you've always been a great dad." And that's something I always wanted to hear come from him, just how he felt about me. I didn't care which way it went, but it felt good to have him say that. And again, I felt really good about the evening. I wasn't expecting what was going to happen in the next 4 days, 5 days. So he one of the things that I learned about that whole dinner meeting was there was a lot of signs of suicide that most people don't recognize in that evening. One is that he was pretty happy, I think, because he had decided that he was going to take his life. So the pain that he was experiencing, whether it was mental or whatever it was, he knew that wasn't going to last much longer. And that's a sign of suicide. He also wanted to go visit all his friends. What I figured out a little bit later is he was going to say goodbye to all his friends as they were around the area, and some that were maybe a couple hours away. He was going by and just going to talk with them, and really in his mind he was saying goodbye, even though he may not have said that directly to them. I did find out that he did talk about suicide to one of his friends, but I didn't hear about that till after he had taken his life. So that was another sign, is just just him traveling around, and he gave away some of his prized possessions and just went and again said goodbye. So those were two signs I could have probably picked up on had I known what I know now after becoming a suicide awareness and prevention advocate. I teach classes on it now, and I just use this as an example, hoping that I can help another family avoid what I had to go through with losing my son. So.
And definitely, as I said, that it is something that I believe that people are afraid to speak about it and to express perspective from a person that actually once actually had those suicidal ideations, it's quite hard to actually talk with people in a way of saying, no, I'm going through this. And as again, I mentioned that as much as there is a huge rise in speaking about mental health, but at the same time, in all honesty, I find myself sometimes in that corner of actually thinking about it, thinking of committing it, and not knowing how to react towards it. But one thing that actually had kept me moving, and it was in my own sense of reasoning. It was in the sense of reasoning of actually realizing that thinking about my parents, especially my mother, and how if I do this, what happens to her? And something that actually kept me away from actually even trying to commit, because I understand the grasp of it. Yes, as much as I'm someone that is aware of mental health, someone that speaks about mental health, someone that speaks about suicide, but there come a point that all these things don't make sense. All these things I've done everything that I could to actually try to get there, to actually come across my problems, try to fix my problems, but nothing works. I guess in a way of having those suicide ideations and not able to actually talk with people. And to someone that actually had those thoughts, in a way of responding, in a way of your son not telling you, sometimes it goes back to that thing. What would you think about me if I tell you? Would you, in a way of, since you spoke about people of your generation not talking about it, but have a different mindset towards mental health, saying that, nah, it's nothing. Work it out, in a way of do something there to get rid of it. Not actually expressing your emotions. But when you're expressing your emotion, one thing that I realized, people have these different role model of telling them, stick it up. Don't allow, what is depression? What is anxiety? What is suicide? So in a way of dismissing those kind of emotions and not realizing that we need those emotions to actually, in a way of help us navigate life, help us in a way of, as much as I'm feeling this way, I know that I have a supportive people in my life. So in a way of, I would say that's one of the reasons why people mostly don't actually talk about suicide. It's easy to talk about anxiety, depression, these types of illnesses, but I feel like suicide has its own stigma that it has caused, and I feel like it's stronger because in the sense of it's associated with death. So yeah, that's how I actually feel when it comes to these kinds of conversation, when it comes to suicide.
Yeah, I think, especially when I've talked with people, younger people, some do like to talk, and they're just looking for someone to recognize that they're going through a tough time, and would just like someone to hear about their tough time and what they're going through right now. There were several people that I've talked to who were thinking about suicide, and just sitting down and just letting them vent and talk about the things that they were going through, asking them why would you want to take your life? What pain is there? What would cause you to even think that? And then just letting them talk and just let it out. That certainly helps, at least diffuse the situation for a little while. And then trying to get them to some resources that can help them as well if they don't have any already. A lot of times it is, it may be just just something that pops into their head in a moment, and they're not really looking to take their life. They're just looking to end some hurt or some pain, or, they've known somebody who's taken their life, and that's the solution that they had. So that's the solution I'm going to take. Trying to get them to talk is the biggest thing. Being able to recognize signs of suicide is another one. And then just being able to ask the person if they're thinking about taking their life, if they're thinking about, thinking about suicide. Those are questions that you really need to talk, and you need to be direct like that as well. You need to say, are you thinking about taking your life, or are you thinking about suicide? Again, one of the big reasons is if you say, are you thinking about hurting yourself, which is something that, sounds logical to ask, because, if they're going to die by suicide, they're going to harm themselves for sure. But they don't see it that way. They may be experiencing pain, and what they're thinking of is the suicide is going to end their pain. So no, they're not going to harm themselves. They're just going to end their pain. And that question, you get an answer. No, I'm not thinking about harming myself. I'm thinking about, well, they may not even say that, that they're thinking about taking their life to end the pain. But the question, are you thinking about suicide? That's much different. And that gets to the heart of the matter and gets them speaking.
Towards speaking, and I believe that it's quite important to actually highlight this when it comes to this thing. Because as much as something as wanting them to speak is important, but at the same time, being mindful of what kind of questions you ask, and avoiding some sort of triggers. And one thing that I realized, and whenever I have spoken about suicide, not that many times, as I've said, that it's a conversation that's quite different from other conversations when it comes to mental health.
Yeah.
Even if you say it, whereas you see it in a way of when people still speak about mental health, there's a huge possibility that they won't actually mention suicide. Yeah. And to me, it's very alarming because it's something that exists, and especially when it comes to men. Because I remember speaking with you, I don't want to make this conversation that I'm in the side of men, but it's honest truth. And I forgot the guy. I forgot his name, but he's from England, but he resides in the States, where he actually speaks on men's issues. Whereas Chris Williamson, the host of Modern Wisdom, said that in a way of it's all right to speak about women when it comes to suicide. But when we talk about men, we need to include women in it. And that was very profounding. But when we speak about women's issues, when it comes to suicide, men are not even included in the conversation. And I feel like that's where another thing that plays a huge role in actually having that sense of, flip, I'm not in a way of my problems are not in a way of paid attention on. And as much as I might speak, but I know the truth that a woman will be, actually people will take a look at a woman instead of me and not realize that. And as one thing that I've said, need to grow up, need to work it out in a way, things like that. And I've been trying to have this conversation, and it's not, and again, it's not easy to actually speak about such conversation. I just want to ask a question that I feel like it's a question that is quite different. And how did it feel to actually mourn your son knowing that he committed suicide?
Yeah, that was, that influenced a number of things. At first, his mother and I were thinking about just doing a private memorial service, and not inviting a whole lot of people, but his friends found out about that and asked if they could come. So we, you know, just because of the stigma of suicide, that kind of drew us to that private service. And then we opened it up. We had a big service, and I think that was the thing that we really needed to do. It allowed his friends to come and be a part of it. And one of the really cool things was I spoke at the memorial service, and at the end, I asked his friends if they ever see me out to come up and tell me stories about Mark. And so when the service was over, I was outside, waiting to leave for a reception. And one of his friends came up to me and told me a story about Mark. And then another one came up and told me a story about Mark. And then soon I had like a line of about 30 of his friends all wanting to talk to me and tell me a story about Mark. And, I still have all those stories with me. So that really helped the mourning process. Had I not had that, open memorial service, I would never have heard those stories. But the fact that Mark died by suicide really, almost took that away from me. Cause I heard all kinds of stories about, helping his friends. He got a refrigerator for one of his friends. He did a baby shower for one of his, couple friends, and he did a lot of these other little things. I always was wondering where my money was going that I was giving to Mark, and that's when I found out that he was spending it on his friends as well as himself. But he spent a lot of money on his friends. He really cared about them. So that was one big thing, was just the memorial service. And then I think afterwards, there's a lot of shame and regret, trying to ask yourself questions about, what did I do wrong as a parent that my son died by suicide? And cause he didn't leave a note. He didn't do any of that kind of stuff. So I don't really have a lot of information about the night that it happened. So I think that, just having those questions, Mark, why did you do this? Could there have been, could I have helped in some ways, or something else I could have done differently? And just having to experience all those questions, over and over again. And I did that for a while. But finally I had to get to the point where I just had to forgive myself and say, there's nothing I can change now. I don't know if there's anything I could have changed back then, just with the knowledge that I had. And so just, I had to forgive myself and just leave it there and not really mull about that too much more.
How did it feel after you forgave yourself?
It felt like a load was lifted. It helped in my grieving process and getting to the point of, being able to carry the grief and being able to, accept what happened. So that was a key part, the forgiveness, all the forgiveness pieces.
Because most people actually don't get past that in terms of forgiving themselves and being able to be in that loop of actually remembering a person that has committed suicide. Keep on remembering, not to realize that in order for them to actually help themselves is forgive themselves. And there's this big thing when a person that has committed suicide, they become this big villain. People hate them and kept asking themselves, why did they do it? And one thing that I actually usually see is the fact that, why didn't you tell us? But at the same time, a person was showing signs and people starting to care when they're no longer here. It's something that I saw and actually firstly saw myself as, why as we keep on doing this, realizing, knowing that we will actually miss these people. And it's a trend here in South Africa that has been happening for years, especially when it comes to celebrities. And actually a celebrity comes out and says that they actually suffer from mental health problems.
Mm-hmm.
And they once had suicide ideations. And as a society as a whole, as always, we judge them and ask them, what do they know about that? And that when it comes to mental health, because they have everything. They have money, they have a happy life, thinking that money solves everything, not realizing that it's quite different when you have everything and have no one. And that's how most of the time we feel when they have all these things, think that we have everything. The only thing that we need is money, and not realizing that sometimes money can make us distance some people that we actually love. And towards that love, we actually start being so depressed. And whenever we have that, in that space, the isolation, we become having these ideations, we're having these thoughts of actually, how about I actually end my life? And probably everyone will be happier. And isolation is something that is big. Mm-hmm. That is big when it comes to suicides, because a person is most of the time alone and able to think about these things, and having those inner voices winning of saying that do it is the right thing to do. You're not worth it. Having those things, and it becomes something that one actually start believing in them. So actually, as I'm hearing myself talking, and it actually I'm reminiscing to the thoughts I used to have back then, because as I've said that I myself suffered from suicide ideations and actually saw myself of not being enough, of not someone as not doing enough in the sense of people to love me, and having that, wanting to, that sense of validation, people to actually truly love me, because if they love me, and I will be happier. If they don't love me, I will be miserable. So it's something that I myself went through, and sometimes that thing of suppressing emotions can play its own role, because suppressing emotions, you don't feel anything. You want to be numb, and it lead to another things. So yeah, I just wanted to actually, in a way of sharing that.
Mm-hmm. No, yeah, suppressing emotions and trying to isolation. Those are huge red flags for potential suicide anyway, or just leading to other bad habits or addictions or things. I know that I'm an introvert, so I like being alone and have time for my thoughts. But I still need to be around people and everything, and be able to talk to people, and just with the different ministries and things that I run, I'm probably a lot more open about what I'm thinking about, and the things I've been going through. If someone asks me how you're doing, they usually get surprised sometimes by the answer that I'll give them, because it's not going to be, I'm doing fine. If something's going on, I will tell them, and just because I'm used to it, and that's why I ask other people to do through our recovery ministry, through Love Never Ends ministry for grief, and a lot of the other things that I do. So, but just I used to stuff things. I used to stuff my anger, and then it would come out in just rage at some points, and I just had to finally deal with that and not stuff it, and learn how to be angry in probably a more, trying to think of the right word, just be able to handle my anger in a much better way, and be able to be angry without, blowing up and getting upset and all that stuff. You can be angry at a situation, but you can talk about it in a reasonable way while you're angry. And that's where I've gotten to now. So I can talk about the anger and then just deal with it right up front and continue to move on instead of stuffing it like I used to.
And let's speak about Love Never Ends.
Mm-hmm.
And in a way of definitely realizing that it is something that was, I would assume that after you actually experience that type of trauma, I would say, or type of pain, losing your son. And can you tell us more about it and what kind of resources that it offers for people that actually deal with grief?
Yep. Yeah. Love Never Ends was not, none of the things that I've done after my son passed away really have been things that I had a vision that this is what I want to do in my life. Everything's kind of changed at that point when my son died. One of the first things that I did, I'm a pastor, and I got a letter from our local police department, and they were looking for chaplains. And so I signed up and went through the whole process to become a chaplain. And then I would find myself at a scene where someone had died a number of times. It's been by suicide. And they're helping to care for the family that is gathered there. So being able to do that and just learning how to manage my own emotions, because as soon as I go to a scene where somebody has died, it brings back a lot of memories of Mark. And just being able to differentiate that scene from my own memories, and just being able to work with the people that are there, care for the people that are there, and then, leave the scene and leave all of that there, not picking it up and carrying it with me. And just, dealing with any of my own thoughts from Mark that I've have. So that was really the first step, was just becoming a chaplain. And from being a chaplain, I was introduced to a local suicide awareness and prevention coalition, which is a lot of mental health organizations and other individuals and people who had a heart for suicide awareness. And I became a member of that board from the fact that I was someone, as a father who had lost a son to suicide, so I could give my story. And I also ran a recovery ministry for all different types of recovery. It's wasn't specifically for drugs or alcohol. So we had all kinds of mental health and other types of recovery. And so I ran it for there. And then it was actually on the 10th anniversary of Mark's passing is when I started Love Never Ends. And I had a number of parents that I'd worked with over the years who'd lost children, actually both of them to drug overdoses. And they kept on saying, well, you should start a ministry for this. You should be talking to other parents who've lost children. And I felt that pulling as well, but I wasn't doing anything to start it. So that was about 2 years in the making that it took me to get to starting up Love Never Ends again on the 10th anniversary of Mark's passing. I launched the website, and originally it was focused on bereaved parents. So parents who'd lost children. I had a lot of resources out there focused on helping parents who'd lost children, and we had in-person and online groups for parents who'd lost children. And that's where we started. This last year, I changed it over because I had a lot of other people that were struggling with grief that really wanted to come to our meetings and participate there, but they hadn't lost a child, but they lost someone else that was close. And so I opened it up and changed it to more of a grief and loss ministry earlier this year. Updated the website. And, what we've got, a number of groups that meet both, again, in person and online, on a monthly basis. I've got resources on there that, articles that you can take a look at. I'm in the process of writing one specifically on suicide. And, so that will hopefully be up there in the next couple of weeks. And I've got, I do workshops for grief, and we have other events, things for, very specific for grief, both online and in person. I also have, one of the other resources is my book. So I'd written the book really kind of takes a person through my own grief journey. I also have, Bible stories of people from the Bible who suffered grief as well, and just kind of take a look at what they went through and how they handled it. As well as at the end of each chapter, I've got questions so a person can apply their own grief journey to that chapter and to the things that I was teaching in that chapter, to help them with their own grief journey. And the name of that book is Gracious Grief After Suicide Loss. And it's Feel God's Love After the Worst Day of Your Life is the subtitle. So.
Definitely. I think that book actually had its own, I would assume that you reminisced about your son.
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
What actually kept you going in terms of, sometimes we have this perception that we don't want to think about that certain thing that actually hurts us within and decide to stop. So what actually made you continue?
I think one of the big driving factors is, I just hate to see people going through what I went through. And if I can prevent any of that, that would be great. If I can help somebody, because I went through my grief journey on my own for the most part. I had some help, but not a lot. And, so if I can help somebody to be guided through their grief journey, the book is there to help. If there's some things that they need to learn about grief, there's articles on the website. And so that's kind of what I wanted to do, is really just help other people, to deal with the hard things in life. And because I've been through a number of different things. And so that's what kind of keeps me going, is knowing that, someone is being helped by it.
It's really a great thing to actually have this sense of wanting to help people. And at first you sometimes you don't, to me, it was something that was quite hard to do and quite hard to open up about. Because I myself, before this podcast and released a book, it's a bunch of poems, and name of the book Lost, a collection of poems. And to that stage, I felt like I was actually lost, actually not knowing where I am, what was actually feeling, didn't know the whole thing about mental health. And in all honesty, it really had a huge toll on me. And I was lucky enough to actually find an editor, which became one of my friends. And he actually I feel like it was the first person to actually say to me that I have courage in terms of speaking about this, which is being vulnerable with people that I don't even know. It takes a lot to be vulnerable and towards people. And mind you, I didn't even know the word vulnerability, its meaning. So I just wrote what I actually felt. And in all honesty, people actually received the book well. And I just finished this year. Was it this year? I think last year. It was last year where I finished my second book that is coming out very soon. And It's something that its name a lot. At last, I found healing, and in a way of it's something that actually play. I feel like that's where I realized that I'll flip. I know what I actually struggle with when it comes to mental health. I know how it actually feels to be in a dark place and feels like there's no one there. And it wasn't easy, in honesty, to arrive at. It wasn't easy, and it had its own kinds of things that I didn't believe that I had. Because in the book, I speak about depression, I speak about anxiety, I speak about suicide. And I'm someone that, in a way of, write them as characters, write them as, in a way of personalizing them, in a way of you are a person. Depression is a person. Anxiety is a person. Depression is a person. And another side that I believe that people don't know me is the fact that I struggle with addiction. And at some point that I realized that I need to stop alcohol, because it was something that had really bad effect on me. What I'm trying to get at is the fact that storytelling plays a huge role when it comes to healing. Storytelling gives us that, oh, flip, this person has struggled with this. So I can able to actually read this and definitely find some tips in terms of how they escaped, in a way of not being stuck in that feeling that you would realize that, oh, flip, I might even think that I might end my life. And it's something that I myself was stuck at, not knowing where to go and how to feel. So writing the book really helped me, and it helped me actually being vulnerable with people and being vulnerable with myself and being honest with myself, with my feelings. And it has been a journey that I've really enjoyed, and really realized that it's quite important to actually share your story. It's quite important that to realize that there's a change that you are making, even if it's that one person, even if you touch that one person. That's my philosophy on this podcast. And as much as many people might listen to it, but as long as it would touch that one person and being able to actually make them realize that they're not alone. It's something that we suffer from. Think that we are alone. We tend to not actually realize that this thing doesn't happen to me only. There are people that actually suffering from this thing, and they actually want to reach out. It's something that I realized that we need to actually focus more on it.
Yeah, and I think that being able to tell your story, even if it's a hard story, it's therapeutic for yourself too, and working through your own feelings, working through your emotions, and just being able to again tell it, and be able to tell it in a way that it helps others. It just helps you again to process. Because if you just stuff it and keep it inside, it's just going to stay there, and eventually it'll start fester and come out in other different coping mechanisms to try to deal with it. But if you talk about it and get it out in the open, realizing that being vulnerable is really a good thing. We don't have to hide all of our secrets and keep them hidden, because if you look around, that everybody's got something going on, whether they talk about it or not. You're talking about celebrities. They seem like they have everything going on for them, but you don't know what their everyday life is like, and the emotional things that they have to go through. You don't know what their upbringing was like, and things that they struggle with. And that's the same with everybody. But if you can talk about your struggle or talk about what you've been through, and that helps somebody else, it will give them also the courage maybe to share their own story and help them get through whatever they're dealing with as well.
And I would like to actually, as a pastor, actually speaks on the faith-based healing in a way of, you claim that you say that you definitely your faith plays a central role of your approach to healing and recovery for people that actually suffer from that thing of grief. How do you integrate this in your ministry work, and how have you seen it transform the lives of those you help?
I think a lot of times we just really need to believe in something much bigger than ourselves and just realize it's not all about us. So I am of the Christian faith, and I will tell you that the morning before I even knew exactly what happened, I started praying. I'd received a call from the police department, from a police detective, and at first he wouldn't tell me what was going on. He just said that he was asking, if I was Kevin Skellett and do I live at this address, and we need to come and talk with you. And I said, well, did I do something wrong? Is there something can you tell me why you need to talk to me? And then finally they said it's in regards to your son Mark, and we'll be there soon. It ended up being about an hour and a half before they got there. But after the phone call, after I hung up, I was trying to figure out, well, why are the police calling? What did Mark do? So I tried calling his phone, but it went directly to his voicemail. It didn't even ring at all. So I figured his phone was either turned off or his battery was dead. And then, I just started to think, why would the police be calling? If Mark was in an accident or if he was hurt, they would have told me where he was or what hospital he was going to. And if he was arrested, Mark would be calling, I think, instead of the police. And if he was being investigated for something, I don't think that the police would be coming just to talk to me. They would tell me a little bit more than that, say they had a warrant or something. So then the only thing I could think of is the only reason they're coming here is because they've got a death notification to do. So at that, I just felt a real chill go over my whole body and just really didn't feel good. I was home by myself at that point. My wife had gone to work, and Mark's brother had gone to work, and his younger stepbrother was at school. And so I just said I had to pray and invite God into this situation because I couldn't handle it by myself. And so that's really my faith had driven me to that. And the prayer I prayed was kind of interesting because it wasn't really much of a prayer. I just prayed what I knew at the time. I said, Father, I said, my son is dead. And, immediately God answered me back. I don't know if it was audible or not. I heard it back in my head for sure. It just came right back and said, my son died too. I know exactly how you feel. And, so that kind of, okay. So the God of the universe, God that created everything, he understands where I'm at. He's heard me. But then he said something else. He said, by the way, he's not your son. And so that kind of confused me a little bit, thinking he's not my son. Well, I was there when he was born. He looks like me. He's always been with me a whole life. I don't think he got switched out at the hospital. But then he said, he's my son. I gave him to you. And the only thing I could think to say back to God was, thank you for the time you gave me with Mark. And so just that conversation just was really, helped right there with the healing process, and just knowing that God was right there with me. And that's one of the things that I encourage people to do through the ministry, through my book, is to invite God into the situation as soon as possible. If it doesn't matter where you are in the situation, invite him in, and he will help you one way or another. He'll show you that he's there. 'Cause after that, he's the one that told me I was going to speak at the memorial service. That wasn't something that was high on my list because public speaking was not something that I really cared about back then. And, but over the next 3 days, he just planted all the words in my head of what I was going to say. I never wrote anything down at all. I just went up and, spoke what I felt God had put in my head. And it was, people said it was pretty good. And that's where I got the idea about talking to Mark's friends and telling them to come tell me stories. And I got all those stories. So, but I felt God's been with me throughout my entire grief journey. He's the one that really told me to write the book. He's the one that really told me to start Love Never Ends. And so I just following him as I go on this journey. So.
It's quite something that one needs to actually implement in their lives in a way of just involving God in everything they do. And definitely one of the things that in some place that most people don't actually do is involving God when it comes to, more especially when it comes to grief. And I can relate with this because I remember it been this previous weekend we actually buried my aunt, and it's something that was something that I didn't actually at first, when my mother 2 weeks back told me that her sister passed away, and it's something that I didn't know how to react to it in a way, because we can always prepare all of these things, but when it comes to that, we can't prepare, because the way that we will react towards something. And at first, I didn't know how I actually felt, and I wanted just to be left alone, of not actually speaking to people, just left alone, trying to process my feelings. Fast forward this past weekend, and it's something that you said, that thanking God for the time He gave you with your son. And it's something that sometimes we neglect, of not being able to actually appreciate the time you actually given.
Right.
And I also myself, it's not something that I said, but something that I'm saying now is the fact that I'm very grateful to God for giving me time to actually spend time with my aunt, because definitely there were times that I actually enjoyed, and I remembered at the funeral, I actually reminisced the times that I spent with her, and realized that actually, at least I was able to actually spend time with her, because at some point it really changes your perspective. Actually, grief changes your perspective when it comes to time and when it comes to spending time with people, because firstly, you have this perception now, I'm busy. I can't actually spend time with my family members. And grief strikes, and you realize, oh flip, I was too focused on this, realizing that this is so important. So, and again, thank you so much for sharing that. And before we close off, what would you want the audience to actually get from our conversation today?
Really, I think the biggest thing is, if you're struggling with thoughts of suicide, it doesn't matter where you are located, there's help available. Try to find that help, whether it's a trusted person, whether it's a mental health organization, whether it's a government agency, even a parent or sibling. Just talk it out and let them know what you're going through. I think it makes a huge difference. At least opening up that door, and as we talked about, isolation is very deadly. There's nothing good that comes from isolation. We need people. We need each other. And we need to be able to talk about our issues and our problems. And hopefully I've modeled that today. I think we both have, really talking about vulnerable things and just making sure that it's okay to do that, even for men, even for men. So I know women do that a lot easier than men do. So, but I think that's really the key message is, if you're struggling with suicide, please get help. You can reach out to me at Love Never Ends, the website, loveneverendsministry.org, and I will certainly reach back out to you and talk with you. So.
Thanks so much, Kevin, for actually being here. Thanks so much for sharing your story. Really appreciate it, and really actually was a conversation that I needed, but never knew that I needed this much. So again, thanks so much for actually making the time and being here with us, almost spending an hour. And definitely the work that you're doing is very important. The work, and keep on doing the good work. And in terms of actually helping people out there, because you and I know that most people actually suffer from mental health problems and are afraid to speak about it. And let us not allow people to actually go to that road of suicide and thinking that it's the only solution that they have. So again, thanks so much for being here. And
thank you for having me.
Definitely will let you know when the episode is out. And I hope that you have a great day.
Okay. You too. Thank you so much. All right. Bye.
Bye.